Hey, 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 hey. So, I thought we were going to talk about error handling. How about that? Some error handling. Yes! Yes! Because unfortunately, sometimes there are situations where you need to deal with that. And it's, to me, that's a little bit of a. It's a it's a philosophical debate that is very much like the old, like how you handle errors and like what, like the right way to do it. Like there's no one way to solve this problem, but there are what I think are like good practices, and then there are things that are a little bit in a gray zone, and it becomes a case by case type of thing. So first and foremost, why? If you are working with like any programming language, most of them have the concept of throwing an error or like shutting down the system, like anything, something like you can throw an error. Now, what is my opinion on this? Well, so I argue that throwing an error or like understanding like some point in your code that you can proceed with the program's execution any longer, and just throwing an error and saying, hey, we're not even going to try. The time I think this is a good idea is when you are booting up the system. So if you have let's say that you have like your server needs to access a database, or it needs to open up a configuration file or anything like that at boot time. If you can't access that, then the entire application is going to be broken. There is no reason for you to to try and run the system without, unless you have like hard-coded defaults or something like that, and that's fine for you. But usually you don't. So to me, that makes sense that in that scenario, you will be better off by simply throwing an error and shutting down the program. Now, what I do argue, however, is that if you're in a scenario where you're somewhere in like, let's say that you're calculating a price and you're going to display that to the user, and for some reason a unexpected situation occurs in your code, or like there is an optional situation where for some reason something might not produce the correct value. Now, in good old Java Enterprise, the most common thing I've seen there is that people actually do throw an error there as well, because you can't get the correct number, so let's throw an error. And I argue that that's the wrong way. You should not do that. Sorry. Noisy people. Usually it's much more quiet, but then again, I'm like an hour late for the gym now, so now all of Gothenburg is waking up. Anyway, so I argue that that's probably the wrong way to go about it, and I argue that that's the wrong way to go about it for the same reason that Amazon. Well, for basic, I had the idea myself, but Amazon kind of confirmed it for me with one of their papers they published. So they had an issue with where like they had to synchronize their data across multiple clusters when you're making a purchase. And in essence, what the paper was about was to they needed to make a decision whether or not uptime and having users being able to go through their purchase flow was more important to them than making sure that the user always got the correct information. And from their perspective, they realized that since for the most part, having the incorrect basket value or like the incorrect price or something like that was more of a corner case, and they actually made more money from just keeping the system running and making sure that the user could always make the purchase regardless of whether or not they have the correct price information when they're in the purchase flow. So in essence, the idea was that if you have a small mistake in the order, they can, as a company, apologize and solve that at a later stage. And that's better than failing the application or failing the purchase flow for the user. Because or rather that's what their metrics showed, that they could actually increase revenue by simply having the mindset that we should always make sure that the system is running and like that type of stuff. And that's very much in line with, you know, this high availability mindset that we're in this day and age in IT. And it's also one of the main reasons I love Elixir so much, because like its high availability is like bred into Elixir and Erlang. If you want to talk high availability, take a look at those technologies. Anywho, so in our price situation, if you think about it as a conceptual level, let's say I have a function that calculates a price and shows that to the user. And for some reason, it shows the incorrect information. Now, you might say that, oh shit, that's a critical bug. And I will argue to you that it is absolutely a bug that we should fix, but it's not the type of error, or rather that issue, it's not the type of issue that you should fail. You know, it's not that critical if you think about it. It's not critical enough for you to fail the entire like purchase flow for the user, because let's say that there is an incorrect piece of information on the page, and the user comes to the checkout flow and they see the receipt and they see that, oh, I paid more or less than I expected. Maybe that's okay to them. Maybe like the price difference, like the calculation might be off by a few like dollars or crowns or whatever, a few units of currency. And maybe that's not the problem. And if it is a problem, they will contact the customer support and get it fixed that way. But if they can't purchase anything, if you throw an error, that's going to affect their opinion about the quality of your product. I mean, that just brings even more frustration. Let's say that the calculation was only incorrect for one item in their cart, and you fail. Because if they feel uncomfortable with that, they still have the option of removing that single item and getting the other stuff. Do you see where I'm going with this? So to me, when you're designing a function or an abstraction that does a piece of calculation, don't throw things. Don't throw an error. Don't behave, like create abstractions that will return, like for an unexpected input will simply return, like I love that about like the sorting algorithms. You get a positive or a negative number or a zero based on like the sorting. And I think that's really great. It's the same thing in JavaScript when you use index off. You're going to get an index, but if you can't find the thing you're looking for in the array, you get a -1. And that's exactly how I write my functions, because I know that if I do that, then my function is safe to use in the system. It cannot produce a critical error. It's just going to run the calculation. And then even if the calculation is incorrect, I mean, some systems, of course, there is absolute, like, it kind of depends. I mean, if you're programming a pacemaker, then your calculation needs to be correct. As I said, it kind of depends on the type of issue that this can cause. So don't use this as a silver bullet for every single problem. Think about the problem. But I think there is some truth to this idea that for the most part, maybe we are you yourself, and me, of course, or the industry, you're overestimating how dangerous a bug or an issue is in the system. Because let's remind ourselves of something when we talk about quality and making sure that everything is working. If you look at yourself, if you use a computer program on your computer and something like, say, your computer freezes, like if it slows down and like for some reason it's not responding, what's your first response? Is it to uninstall the program and never use it again, or do you just restart your computer? I don't know about you, but I restart my computer and then I see if I can make it work again. Bugs are important and errors are important to fix, but don't overestimate how much of an impact it has on your users. Some bugs and errors and like situations are critical and some are not. So think about that, because trust me, people, if your product provides enough, that's the measure. If your product's value to the user is higher than the frustration of the bugs you have, then they will keep on using it. So that's the the tug of war that you have. You're always going to have bugs and errors, and the way that you deal with them is up to you. I argue, as I said, just make sure that the system is always working. It doesn't have to work flawlessly, but if you crash your system, nobody can, like, the user is completely locked out. So think about it.